So far, the Arab Spring hasn't turned out so well for many in the Middle East. Is the Middle East really doomed to an Islamist winter? Or is there something Middle Easterners, or we, can do to help prevent that outcome? Elliot?
I don't think it's doomed. I'm struck by the fact that in an election in Libya, the Islamists lost. In the presidential election in June in Egypt, Morsi won 51-48. And we see now in the streets of Egypt people fighting against a Muslim Brotherhood, let's say Muslim Brotherhood takeover. So I think there's a real resistance there. And we have a job. Our job is to do better than we've done over the past few decades at upholding the standards of democracy and rule of law, of speaking out. And the speaking out cannot be by the spokesman for the State Department. This has got to be the President, whoever it is, and the Secretary of State. If there's ever going to be a turn away from this, it's going to have to be in another free election where they lose, because I think the people are going to find as they look for jobs that, you know, Islam is not the answer. But if there's no election, they don't get to make another choice. So it's the rules of the game that we can help them maintain, partly through our aid, but more, I think, through moral and political support for the people in those countries, and there are many of them, who wish to avoid a permanent Islamist takeover.
Dennis? You can applaud for that. That's fine. Dennis?
Look, I would say a couple of things. One, there never was an Arab Spring, and there was never going to be an Arab Spring. The very concept of spring is that this was going to be a quick transformation. We were going to see a new Middle East. It was going to be the flowering very quickly of democracy. That was never in the cards. The institutions for that don't exist. The political culture for that doesn't exist. What has happened is we have seen an awakening. And the significance of the awakening is that people have discovered and think they have the right to be citizens. And as citizens, they have a voice. Now, what's interesting is people who in Egypt who haven't had a voice for 40 years are not about to surrender it, which is one of the reasons we're seeing the reaction to what Morsi has done. When Morsi seeks to exploit the regional and international applause he got for brokering the ceasefire, he immediately sought to turn that into political advantage domestically. And it has produced a backlash. And the backlash is quite extraordinary, and it's a reminder. People in Egypt are not just going to submit. If he thinks that he can rule the way Mubarak did, he's discovering he's actually going to have to govern. Now that creates openings for us, because A, he has needs. There's expectations on the part of his public that he has to try to address. B, it means there are people out there who also need time to organize and to create an identity. Elliot was talking about the importance of reaching out to many of them. We have to look at this as at least a 10 to 20-year project. The Islamists in the near term have all the advantages. They have organization, they have an identity, they reach out to the poorest parts of society. The secular elite is precisely that, an elite. They have no connections to the 40% of Egypt that makes less than $2 a day. So it's going to take time to create a political reality where they can compete. Our job is to help preserve the political space so they can't compete. Our job is to create a set of boundaries so that Morsi, who realizes he's got to address the expectations and the needs and produce something on the economy, he has to understand you play by a set of ground rules or you're not going to get that help. The fact that he has two universes. One is ideological and one is what I'll call economic. If the ideology was governing him today, then he would not have brokered a ceasefire with the Israelis, and he might well have used this as an advantage to break the peace treaty with Israel. But he understood the price was too high. So rather than doing that, he went ahead and he brokered this. He gained something by it, by the way. Unlike Erdogan, who couldn't broker it because he wasn't talking to the Israelis, suddenly Morsi realized, even if he wasn't personally talking to the Israelis, he gained for Egypt by, in fact, being a broker. But even more to the point, he understood, if I choose ideology, I'm not getting any help from the outside. I get no help from the outside. I can't produce anything economically. And the expectations of this country are that if we, the Muslim Brotherhood, are going to achieve our aspirations, we've got to deliver something. That gives us leverage. And our leverage ought to be implemented, not in a way where we're trying to dictate to them in a fashion that allows him to sort of stand up as a great protector of Egyptian pride and become the embodiment of protecting the Egyptian nationalism, but in a way that makes it clear, you can make your choices, we make ours. Here are the ground rules. You respect minorities because that's a fundamental principle for us. You don't exclude half your population. Can't be a successful society if 56% of the women are illiterate, and you're going to exclude them. There has to be political pluralism. Again, because that's what builds confidence on the outside that you're going to build an Egypt that can be successful. And that creates the space that we need to maintain. And you have to fulfill your international obligations first and foremost on the peace treaty with Israel. You do that, we'll provide you help. You don't do that, and you shouldn't expect help.